Yeah, I would not be surprised if if everybody there was sort of given some notice, or
They
there
haven't.
might be a deal. They might actually have a deal on the go as far as selling the park, which we wouldn't know anything about.
Well, they told us in an email that they have no interest in selling it. Ron emailed CBRE asking if it was available, because they were the ones that had it on the park on commercial listing before, and CBRE said no, it's not available, and there's no plans to make it available. So I just don't understand, and it's a serious impediment to my client being able to get rid of the place. And
Yeah.
I know there's other terms, when it comes to like approving a tenant, for instance. The park needs to approve a tenant, right? Well, they have to have a reasonable right to not approve them. Like, it has to be a pretty good reason, because it does get in the way of the sale. So you would think it would be the same with this form too. They would have to have a really good reason to not want to fill this form out, right? But
Which lender are you working with?
well, I mean, I'm the listing agent, right? So it's whoever they're bringing, and I've been told by other realtors that really the only two big banks that will lend on a chattel like this, because that's what it is, a chattel loan, is TD and RBC, but they both require that landlord assignment permission. It just gives them the ability to get onto that land, take over if they're in arrears. It gives the lender the ability to get out of arrears, take control of the manufactured home, move it, or sell it.
Yeah.
So
the challenge there is, if the lease is terminated and the owner of the mobile walks away, it has no value. It would cost the bank would be the one, ultimately that would probably have to take on removing it and then try to recover costs against somebody who defaulted if they just walked away. So it's just high risk, I think, is the challenge.
Well, that would be the risk of the lender, which they're more than willing to take as long as they get that thing signed off saying that they have the ability to come in and remove it should something like that happen, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's driving me crazy. I'm spending so much time and effort on it, and I'm gonna be getting zip out of it. Except for a really big learning process that maybe I'll never take on another manufactured home listing again.
Well, and it also gives us, maybe a little bit of foresight, when we're dealing with something like this, to have those conversations with the park managers and park owners in advance. Say, hey, look, we're going to be selling this. This is going to be, something that we come up with. What does that look like as far as a turnaround? Is this a conversation we need to start now, before we start marketing? And can we submit this, just in case, and then get that information, try to get it signed in advance so that you have it when it's requested. Maybe that becomes part of the listing package and the listing due diligence when dealing with lease land or short-term leases.
Like cash buyer only type thing, kind of like if it were a co-op, chances are you're not going to get any lender to approve it.
Yeah, well, and right now, I mean, it's certainly looking like it's cash or nothing, right?
Unless these guys sign on the dotted line allowing a lender to come in, take over a manufactured home in arrears.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe they can find another lender or an alternate lender of some kind. It's curious though that all the actions certainly do suggest that the park ownership is that it has to be something else there. Like there has to be.
Well, the guy's just looking for an out. It's obvious the owner's looking for an out, and he has been for a long time. But because it's on a floodplain and there's riparian area setbacks, nobody wants it.
Yeah. Yeah.
can't do anything with it. Anyway.
Yeah. It's a risky one for a lot of parties, I guess. Really, too. That's sort of one of those challenges when you're, mobile homes specifically, or any property that's on leased land, be it an apartment building that's been converted to a long term, or a life lease or something like that. You always have a little bit of hiccup here and there, and it is tougher to get some security depending on the structure. Even some of these long-term leases that that are originally were 50 years, 70 years, 80 years. A lot of them were written in the 60s and 70s, and they're coming to term right now. And so, what does that look like to somebody potentially buying it? Like, we've got a couple of condos for sale on the market right now that have under 30 years left on their lease. So what does a renewal look like if a renewal is optioned? What happens if the the owner of the lease decides not to renew or do something different with the property? It's a tough one. You buy an interest in the property, but you don't own the interest in land.
But at least in a situation like that, where there's a set lease in place, you can go into it and make an educated decision based upon crunching the numbers and knowing the very real possibility that it won't be renewed. At least then you have some sort of definitive end goal that you can plan for. But when it's month to month and there's no lease, no sublease, no nothing, it's just like, whoa, it could be tomorrow, it could be 2 years from now, it could be a decade from now. It's just like that not knowing is the worst part of it.
Yeah. And mobile homes in general, the mobile home act and the registry, like that's changed so much over the last 25 years with the regulations and the requirements, and everything, the board rules change and the act change. And I can remember years and years and years ago doing a lot of business in a mobile home park and selling quite a few of them. And 5 years later, when you're getting repeat phone calls, it's hesitation. You don't really want to go back down there. I know we worked together and I sold you this, but times have changed and regulations have changed. I don't know if I can sell this for you today, unless of course you're willing to, when it comes to stuff like the CSA certification and the silver label, like that can be a pretty significant expense for somebody who owns a mobile home and just doesn't have the means to get it done. It could be completely handcuffed as far as the rules go.
Yeah, we needed to do that too.
So the bottom line is, when you convey the actual risks to a buyer, that they stand the chance to be given notice to move, and there isn't anywhere they can move, like, what's the value really?
Oh, it's completely up to, like I was saying earlier, if there's a lease and there's only like 20 years left on it, at least then you can crunch the numbers and see if it makes sense for you, especially because especially
there's only one reason, there's only one reason why a park doesn't give people a lease. It's because they've got other ideas about what they might want to do with the property, so they don't want to be committed to them.
I know. I know, but I mean, at what point is there reluctance to work with their tenants that are currently there? Like, do their tenants have any rights? I mean,
No,
the tenants have no rights.
no. Their rights are, the legislation for manufactured home park rental is, if they want to terminate the lease and evict them, they have to give them, I think it's 1 year of notice, and they have to, I think they have to pay them out market value, but market value might be like $6,000.
Yeah.
And Langford actually has their own set of rules above and beyond that, but it doesn't give much protection still.
Yeah,
It makes it hard. It makes it a problem and challenging for a developer to come in and and kick everyone out and put up a bunch of townhouses. I've gone down that road on the other side trying to do that to a park with clients. And ultimately they did succeed a couple years later because there are protections in place, but they're minimal, and really the person is at tremendous risk if they're going in and buying a unit with a month-to-month lease, even a short lease.
So, I mean, what do you say to a client when they say, hey, I'm in a tough spot, I want to sell this, can you help me?
I'm gonna tell them that I might not be able to help you. Let me refer you to a mobile home specialist.
I know a couple of are at EXP.
How you doing, Chad? Oh, sorry, Ron, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's not too different. Like if you were gonna sell a house for somebody and you learned that there was a material latent defect, you're gonna have to tell the people, like, I might not be able to sell you this for you. I don't think I could even take on the job until we resolve this issue.
Yeah, I mean, that for me was the electrical that wasn't to code. So I said, I can't sell this for you until you decide, if you decide you want to do that.
The lease, the absence of a lease to me is on the same level of a challenge.
Well, she showed me her original lease paperwork that she had from when she got into the place, and it did resort to month after until terminated. So I thought maybe that would be enough, but
I remember when I stood on the property there with you months ago and asked about the status of the lease, and learned in our conversation that the entire property had been offered for sale, and they were basically trying to sell it for development. I mean, that's more than a red flag. That's a stop sign.
Well, I know. I mean, but we looked into that, and CBRE said no, it's not on the market, and there's no plans to have it on the market.
Yeah, but the seller wants out of it.
Of course he does, but he can't.
And to be fair, not on the market doesn't mean they don't have a deal in place where it's just experiencing due diligence. It's not available to anyone else, but it doesn't mean that there isn't some sort of contractor or deal in the works.
Or intention to find one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you doing, Chad?
Good, yeah. Just getting back into the swing of it. Had last week off. We went to Hornby, so yeah, just getting back into it, doing lots of showings this week, so that's good. It's awesome.
Nice. Are you like you have a couple of different buyers, a pool of buyers that you're working with, and kind of setting up to walk through, obviously, but we were talking about when we're listing a property kind of thing, like in Andy's case there, the absence of a lease and some due diligence in advance as far as being able to obtain some information. But when walking through with buyers, just sort of making sure that anything that we see and we find that potentially could be a challenge down the road, the awareness level is raised, and we're developing that sort of list of questions that we're going to need to ask and potential conditions that we're going to have in a contract as far as making sure that they're secure.
Sorry guys, just want to jump back to Andy, and we and you and I, everyone here, we're all wired to try and help people and solve these problems. And to me, it's astonishing that there's 3 people there with buyer agent representation that want to buy it and are trying to get through the due diligence. And you might be able to get it to happen. It's just going to have to wait until that landlord signs that document, if he does. I've only got about a minute left here, and I get to talk to the U.S. Customs guy. I'm in the lineup for the Port Angeles ferry, so I'll be shutting down my video and audio here in a sec.
All right, sounds good. Who else we got on here? Emily, how are you doing? Are you there? Are you frozen?
No.
Okay.
I'm here. How's it going?
Good, you?
Good. Yeah. It's been a bit of a busy like couple weeks. My grandma's moving out from like a pretty large house into an assisted living. So we're kind of trying to clear that out and get her ready to move and get the house up for sale. So it's a big process when someone's lived in that house for like a very, very long time. So yeah, kind of been like up to my head doing that and trying to, schedule.
Yeah,
We're
sorry,
gonna
just turning it off right now.
Okay. We're gonna I think try and do an inspection
Sorry.
beforehand. I don't know if what you guys think about doing that before listing the property, just to like kind of have that already cleared up and have the report in there. Is that a benefit, do you think?
Yeah, and that's, it's not an uncommon practice to do an inspection prior to listing. I wouldn't say it's common practice.
Yeah.
In a busy market, when you have, lots of buyers and that kind of stuff, there can be, an element of proactivity having that done in advance. Part of the challenge there is a buyer may want still to have their own independent instructions or inspection. The inspection itself, it's a contract and it's agreement between whoever hires the inspector and the inspector. Some inspectors are quite, they're quite adamant and quite insistent on ownership of that document and that information. So and generally speaking, I think, for the most part, it can go okay. But I have had experiences where inspectors have sued people for redistributing the information because it was a breach of their contract and so on and so forth. So something just to, keep in the back of your head. It's certainly not a common thing, but
Okay.
it's something that has happened in the past.
Mhm.
The other side of that too, it's that there could be stuff that comes up in the inspection, which may have an impact on the value. If the inspector finds something that could be argued as a material latent defect or a potential latent defect, that's something that you're going to have to come up with and address. So, although it's good and you have that information available to prospective purchasers when they still want to get their own, but it could identify a number of issues that you may or may not be expecting.
Right. Yeah. So like I know there was kind of when I was talking to my family about it, they were hoping to do it so that we could fix some things that come up. But
Yeah.
then at the same time, it could open a bit of a can of worms of things we don't know exist. Yeah, so I just wasn't sure like if the benefits outweigh, I don't know. So that's good. That's good feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, and two, sure, they're gonna find some stuff. All inspections find something.
Yeah.
And obviously depending on the inspector and the level of of how they dig in or how far they dig in can
Mhm.
vary from one to another. The reports are generally pretty generic. They're templates that are more or less tick a box here, add a comment here, similar to our programming and that kind of stuff. So I mean, I'd say generally there is some benefit. Home inspections probably not going to detect something like a material latent defect. The material latent defect terminology is essentially it's something that's not discoverable upon reasonable inspection. So it's something that that nobody else knows, and there's really no way of finding out, right? So
Right. Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And that's really why that question exists on the PDS and such. So
Mhm.
generally speaking, a home inspection, the upside of that too is it could really help you determine the value. And if that's information you have and that's information that you can and are sharing with prospective buyers, it eliminates the potential of the buyer to be like, oh well, we'll just offer this price and then we'll get an inspection done and then we'll go back and we'll nickel and dime to try and get some money off the purchase. So there is a bit of a proactive element, and it shows that you've done a lot of research and a lot of due diligence as far as establishing what the market price is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing. So I was hoping it would help me kind of figure out what to list at. I've done a lot of comparisons and stuff like that, but I'm just not 100%. So at that point, should I like ask colleagues what they think for their advice? Like,
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Give, wrangle a couple people up and, bring them over, take a tour, get some feedback. Absolutely, yeah.
Like before listing, just is that kind of fine to do it before the listing and let them walk through? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, totally fine. And you can also, that's one of the, we try to obviously conduct the tours as far as new listings and stuff like that go. And I know our participation, is hit and miss.
Yeah.
But that, that's good value that we do provide to sellers when people participate in that, because it's instant feedback. You've got a new product to the market, you've got a, obviously price. It gives you an opportunity to collect some feedback and say, what do these other half dozen or dozen realtors think of the price? They're going to tell you if they think it's high, they think it's low, they're going to, suggest maybe this, maybe that, but that's really good feedback that you can use in navigating the transaction with the seller.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Andy, your hands up.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of circle back about what you were talking about, material latent defects, and basically the definition of to disclose, a material latent defect means cannot be discerned through reasonable inspection of the property. So why is it an illegal suite considered a material latent defect when you can just easily call up the municipality and say, hey, do you guys have this suite on record?
That's one. I think part of the challenge, is the description of the suite. It's a legal suite, it's a conforming suite, it's a non-conforming suite. I've never understood that. But our technically, I guess, it could be a legal suite. It could have been, constructed or built to, a legal standard as far as all the codes and municipalities go. I'm not sure, like I've always struggled with the notion that a suite may be a material latent defect, because it really is discoverable. The part of the challenge in the courts, a lot of it comes down to verbiage and documentation and description. So a suite can be a suite, when you're stating it's a legal suite or it's a conforming suite. There's potentially, some value there, I would suggest, but be very careful, because you don't necessarily know, or there could be some things that define it. I know courts and some cases have obviously ruled that illegal suite is a material latent defect, but it really is discoverable. So, in my opinion, in my mind, that really just, it suggests more of a patent defect than a material latent defect.
I agree.
The courts have already said it's a material latent defect, but I don't get it completely. And maybe that's something to talk about, with Peter, why the MLD is applied to it when it really is discoverable.
To me, it seems very cut and dry. I mean, it's like it's either been permitted and done to code, making it legal and conforming, or it hasn't been, in which case, if we're covering our butts as listing agents, we would disclose that as a material latent defect when we put the listing up, period.
Yeah.
Or not even allowed to be on listed, period. I mean, they really want to get down to it, but I mean, then there's the whole housing crisis, so they're overlooking that sort of thing, right? So
yeah. David, and then Colin, you each have your hand up.
I was just going to mention about listing a relative's or a close friend's house. One thing that I would highly suggest is have a very candid conversation about their goals. I think sometimes as agents, we get a little tunnel vision on purchase price. And sometimes it's, if it's a long-term family home, maybe they don't want their house ripped apart. And, the absolute highest price point isn't the key motivation for her. She might want a smooth, easy sale. She's probably been in the house a long time, and that might be better. And I've always found having those candid conversations up front really might give you some insight into how to kind of manage selling somebody close to you's property.
Yeah. And coming in with a range and a descriptive for, where you want to be on that range, highest and best and most money possible could mean a little bit longer on the market. It could mean a lot more disruption. It could mean a lot more traffic. So I mean, is 100% right. And it is sometimes a little bit tricky, not just with family, but, even doing business with friends, sometimes, can provide some challenges that weren't necessarily expected. There's a lot of expectations on you as the professional, but personal relationships can often kind of change the dynamic of a conversation. So Dave is talking about being very open, very candid, and very upfront. And I mean, certainly that's the best approach for sure. Colin?
Regarding the unauthorized suite, I don't know where I heard this, but I think one of the reasons it's considered a material latent defect is that there's an unknown element of risk that the municipality might shut it down, and there's no guarantee that they won't. So there's just sort of that gray area that person's buying a property where there is a risk of that. And you don't know, you just don't know. And I think that's how it qualifies as an MLD.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. But to that point too, if the city is considering taking action, there'll be a record of that somewhere. And it's probably in the property file at the municipality. So, I totally hear what you're saying. It could be, in process and that kind of stuff. And let's be honest, municipalities historically are not the greatest at keeping records and documentation. So.
Right. But it also could have been flying under the radar, and then 5 years from now, a neighbor says, well, "This guy's got someone come," and they report.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where, like I say, it could be an unknown element of risk that could happen anytime. It's not likely because municipalities are becoming much more. They don't care because they understand that people have a right to a place to live, and that these kinds of suites offer that to everybody. So.
Yeah,
the risk is minimal, but it's there.
Yeah, 100%. The risk is always there. Like every time we walk out the door, and every day that we get up and go to work, and every day we put our realtor hat on, you are always taking risk. And the clients, obviously, from a buyer's perspective, the risk is the investment that they're going to be making in a property, and the trust is in you to make sure that they find the right place and they find the property that they're willing to take that risk on. And our risk, of course, is, making sure that we find them the right place and making sure that we keep them protected. But, we do not, work or live or operate in a risk-free environment on any level whatsoever. Every day is an element of risk that we accept, and it's a level we're comfortable with. And it's a risk that we're willing to take in lieu of whatever the compensation is that we get in return.
Absolutely.
Empty, your hand is up.
Yeah. So this one does have a suite. How do I go about finding if it's authorized or not? She doesn't know because she never rented it out or anything. So do I just call the city for that?
Yeah, so you could pull you could do a freedom of information request and pull the file at the city. Talk to the planning department. Check the zoning of the property. The the municipality websites, for the most part, you can find copies of zoning bylaws and what's allowed, what's not allowed, that kind of stuff. If you can't find it on their website, then usually a call to the planning department is a good place to start. The file in the city itself, it'll have potentially some relevant information. It may actually have permits for the creation of the suite or the development of the suite. Zoning may permit it. When it was constructed, is sort of a, there'd be a grandfather rule, provided, there's documentation that it was done, to code of the day. The challenge, obviously, if somebody's going to go in and do some renovations, they'll have to make sure that they have the ability to bring everything sort of up to code. But check with the city website, check the zoning, and then do a freedom of information inquiry. And then
Okay.
talk to the planning department. Yeah.
I'd say just from my experience as a tradesperson of over 2 decades, I've seen so many suites and so many renovations. And I'd say probably, I'm not even joking, 90%, even more are illegal. People, it's very unfortunate, but the municipalities make it almost impossible, time-wise and financially speaking, to do it properly. It's just ridiculous the amount of hoops you have to jump through. And if Ron were here, he would have a big long story about that too, and could attest to it. So it's one of those situations, unfortunately, where it's a lot easier to ask for forgiveness than it is permission. And that's just the norm, and it has been for a long time. And until our municipal planners and elected officials get their heads out of the sand and make it more streamlined for people to get it done safely and to code, we're just going to see a lot of the same.
Yeah. 100%. Municipalities are the mentality against or opposed to something like that. There's not necessarily a lot of of reasonableness or common sense. Often there's a lot of, well, the book says this, so this is what we have to do, kind of thing. And it's terribly permitting process. I haven't been through the permitting process in Victoria yet. I'm sure I will be at some point. But even a current one that I have right now, I applied for a building permit to tear down a carport and rebuild a carport that was built in the mid-70s, and it's been 4.5, almost 5 months, and I still don't have a permit because the process, you have to file your building permit application. So then they'll have to review it, which can take several weeks, and then they may decide, oh, you need to apply for a variance, and then so the variance application takes another 3-4 weeks, and then they have to go back and revisit the building permit application. Like it's a terrible process. It's just so restrictive, and it really is prohibitive, and that's why Andy's right. Like chances are most of the suites you come across were, they were done on the weekends, called in a couple of contractor friends, and, we're gonna drink some beers and put up some walls and, plumb in a bathroom. Yeah. How are you doing, Dave? What's going on in your world?
I'm good, man. No complaints here. I was going to comment on, I've had some dealings with inspectors, and what they're really looking for 9 times out of 10 is if something's unsafe. They're not looking to kick anybody out of a home because they're very aware that if they evict somebody out of a suite that looks safe and functional, those people, they might just be putting those people into a horrible situation, and they're aware of it. And if you do your due diligence, you do your best. I think when I went through my schooling, the idea here is that when somebody judges the work you did you do everything you could to do the best you could for your clients? And I think that's what we need to kind of keep in mind when we're going through these tricky situations, because there's really complex spider webs you can get stuck in. Like Esquimalt, for example, has a max square footage of a suite. So it might be permitted, it might be legal, but they move a door and add a bedroom to a suite. It no longer is compliant. And how the heck are you supposed to know? You pull the records, the permits there, everything's there, but it's now a 1,100 square foot suite, so it's no longer conforming. So that's the kind of stuff that gets tricky.
I sent out, I think it was a couple of weeks ago in one of my emails, I sent out that sort of decision-making process, and it really is a useful sort of tool. When we're talking about risk, we're talking about potentially an illegal suite or a non-conforming suite. So one, we've identified that problem, and then the next step there is, what steps can we take to really determine and assess the potential liability around it, and how big is this risk? What is the challenge, and then how do we mitigate that? Do we have a plan in place if this comes up? If we make this inquiry and we find out this information, what are our next steps? If we make this inquiry and we find out that everything's great, but we could also make that inquiry and find information that we really don't want, but we still have to disclose whatever it is we find, especially if it's gonna have an impact. And when it comes to, the disclosure of stuff like this, from a listing perspective, it is always better to put that stuff up front on the table. If there is any potential for a buyer to find out this information after they have an offer in place, the perception of finding out something that, arguably would be, a negative impact or a negative perception of the property will automatically reflect the value. So if you don't account for this and you don't make this known and you come to market with a certain price and they find this information, automatically the perception is that you've overvalued your property because you did not account for this. David, your hand is up.
Yeah, just to kind of build on that point, I have actually a long history in car sales, which can have some pretty scary things in the history of the cars. And I can tell you 500 times I've told people up front, and it's very rarely a problem, and if you tell them straightforwardly, right away, they'll lose interest and walk away and somebody else won't care and you can continue business, save yourself a lot of time. Second of all, if they find out on the other end afterwards, after they've been engaged in the property and they've done some due diligence, they spend some time, they are 100 times more pissed off.
It's true. The mitigation, around stuff like that is so important. It's so important to be proactive because you're cutting it off. You never want somebody to find something out, in a surprised manner. One, it will obviously, fracture relationships and it can have a serious impact on the process of the transaction. There's two sides to the transaction. And it's a large transaction. People are invested, they're emotionally involved. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of energy, and a lot of time. And there has to be, a solid element of trust and cooperation between the buyers and the sellers. If the two parties don't trust each other, it is going to be a very difficult transaction. And if a buyer finds something out that obviously the seller knew about but decided not to say, that's going to fracture that trust that really is the foundation of a smooth transaction.
I mean, good faith is so important. Look at Jason's deal in Oak Bay with the oil tank. If that would have been upfront, you could have handled that. You could have told them, lots of parties, lots of money, they could have worked together and make it right. But now that there's no trust, very unlikely it comes together. Yeah. So I mean, we can kind of move on. I'll check in. Who haven't we talked to? Oh, Janice has joined us, so we see how she's doing. But the key really is just if you think that you may or may not want to disclose this, you probably should. And your seller might say, look, I don't want to tell them that the basement suite doesn't have a permit. I don't want them to know about that. Your conversation with your seller should be, look, if somebody brings us an offer and we do not disclose this, it is very easy for them to find out. They can contact the municipality. They're probably going to be conducting some due diligence to, verify if there's anything outstanding at the city or have an inspection or this, that, and everything else. They're probably going to find out. So if we know it, and we obviously know it, we must and we should make that disclosure up front. Otherwise, it will leave the door open to, having to potentially negotiate. So if we make them aware of these potential problems, they now understand that when we've developed our price point and our marketing strategy, we've done that with this in mind. No, nothing hidden, no secrets. This is all accounted for and what we're looking for. What was that, Andy?
You had mentioned yesterday in the meeting that we were going to touch on, the different places to put referral, remuneration, and disclose that in web forms today. There was a form specifically for that, and also in the disclosure remuneration form as well. Yeah.
We can totally do that. I've got one actually right here. Let me grab a blank one and I'll share it. just because it has transaction and confidential information on it. That is, let's see, BCFSA. So there are two disclosure remunerations, and where is it here? It's this one. Can you guys see my list of documents?
Yep.
So you have your seller disclosure of remuneration. Now that's the one, the newer one that you provide to the seller at the time of or prior to reviewing, going through offers, and it must be presented before the offer is presented. So you can present it at the same time, and if you have a stack of papers, just make sure it's top of the list and make sure that that's your regular practice, so that it's never questioned, or if it is questioned, you can say, nope, this is how I always do it. Really Trusted handles those disclosures for you as far as the seller is concerned. The other one for the buyer, the disclosure requirement doesn't necessarily have, where is it here? Doesn't necessarily have a time. Sorry. The requirement is that you have made that disclosure to the buyer. So as buyer agents, you're all familiar with this form. Obviously, the name of your client goes here. This is the subject property that you're dealing with. This is your name. This is your brokerage. This is what you anticipate receiving as far as the cooperating commission being offered. And 99% of the time, there'll be a cooperating brokerage here. If there is a, an unrepresented party or something like that, you may put the seller's name or something like that. But this will generally be the cooperating brokerage. Disclosure of commission when acting as a dual agent. I promise you, in practice, you will never fill this out in British Columbia. We do not operate in a dual agent market, although the regulation allows it. The circumstances and situations where it could potentially be would never be applicable here. There is no reason that a party, you cannot find representation for another party if you're going down that road. So generally, dual agency, you will never see. This part here,
Darren,
you've seen.
can I just stop you there for a sec, interject?
Yeah.
I had a situation yesterday where my client was like, oh, I have a neighbor that may be interested in, purchasing the property. Do they have to go through a realtor to, complete the purchase? And I said, well, I would absolutely advise that they do. If they don't, they're putting themselves at extreme risk, kind of like going to court without a lawyer. It's not a wise thing to do. But that being said, if they insist that they want to represent themselves, they absolutely can. Now, in a situation like that, what would we do on this form?
Well, you're not representing a buyer. This form is disclosure to your client of money that you're going to earn through representing them in the course of the transaction.
So this would be for a buyer, right? Just for a buyer? Yeah. So you wouldn't even touch this then?
No, if it's an unrepresented buyer, you don't have one of these.
Okay.
Yeah. And then down, so I mean, everybody I think on here is pretty good with this first part here. But I was going to touch. We have seen realtors try to disclose a referral that they're paying in this section. This section is actually additional remuneration or additional money you're going to earn over and above what the cooperating commission is listed at. So this is not the place to disclose a referral that you are making. It would be a place to disclose the referral that you are receiving for assisting in over and above the cooperation. So this is not a referral payment or a disclosure of a referral being paid out. Any questions on that?
What is there ever a form where we would disclose that to our client, that we're actually paying another party?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that was sent out to, I'll dig it up. I think it was last week that I sent it out, but there is a standard form for that. And then, so at the bottom, of course, obviously, name, signatures, dates, all that kind of stuff. It is not in the BCFSA forms. It is a BCREA standard form. Disclosure of referral payment. So if you're working with a buyer, if you're working with a seller and you're paying a referral, one, you could just write that in your Schedule A on the listing contract. If you have a listing and something comes out where you end up agreeing to pay a referral afterwards, then you would complete this form and have your client sign it. If you're working with a buyer who's been referred to you by another agent and you're paying that other agent 25%, for example, you'll date it here. You'll put their names down. You'll put the transaction property address down. This is who you are, and this is what you're paying to this person or this entity down here in relation to the transaction that you're completing on behalf of the buyer. So disclosure of remuneration is a disclosure of what you're earning, and the disclosure of referral is what you're paying out, if you're paying anything out at all.
So would you use this form for both buyers and sellers?
You could, yeah. If you're working, like, I mean, generally speaking, if you're taking a listing for a seller and it's been referred to you, it's much simpler to have that referral disclosed in the multiple listing contract on your Schedule A addendum. The key thing is with something like that is make sure that on the listing or when you're submitting it to the office, make sure there's a note that highlights that particular instance, and that way if we're super clear on that, you'll see it on your trade record. And if it's not there, then we need to redo the trade record.
I'm not convinced that everybody knows that this should be done. Like, my big concern is sending somebody a referral, them doing, getting caught up in the work and busy, and then they finally end up maybe doing a transaction like let's say 6 months to a year later, and they forgot that I referred it to them, and it wasn't disclosed and all that. The deal goes through. Where's the checks and balances to make sure that I get paid for my referral?
So generally speaking, referrals often, in my experience, have been, handshakes, text messages, verbal agreements. We do have paperwork to formalize the referral, exactly what's going to get paid. If you refer, in this situation, and you're referring somebody to another realtor for a purchase kind of thing.
Yeah, like, if I'm already dealing with for instance, a buyer who wants to buy down in Victoria area, but they have, let's say, a property that they want to sell up in Parksville because they're relocating. I don't want to go out of my way to list up there, and I don't think it would be in their best interest. So I refer that listing out to another realtor and then hope for the best, right? In that circumstance, it's a bit easier, especially if they need the money from the sale. I can follow it fairly easy. But let's just say it's a lead that I received from a client up island, and I don't want to deal with it, so I refer it to an up island agent. What's to say that, I mean, other than the fact that you have a good relationship with that realtor, and you'd hope that they would, be upfront and honest if they actually close a deal and they remember that it was from you. But I mean, other than that, there's nothing really to make sure and that it's actually happening, right?
No, you're right. And we have to track it, like we have to have little reminders in our, in our calendar to follow up, hey, how are things going up there with so-and-so's property? You having any luck up there? Little touch points every now and then, just as a reminder that, there is a referral to be paid on this. Having an email too, at the very least, a text message is arguably something, but having an email confirming that, like if you're going to have a conversation, I always would be like, hey, I've got somebody, I'm going to send them your way. This is sort of what they're looking for, or this is like what they have to sell. I'll connect you guys in an email. And then, so I draft the email, make the introduction, confirm the, the referral and that kind of stuff, and then you're good. And if you do it that way and you include the client, you're already disclosing to the client that you're going to be receiving a referral. So it's proactive as far as the disclosure goes. Your office still may require the BC FSA form, but if you have an email to the client, arguably that's something that you could use to prove disclosures made. But obviously best practice is to have the form signed. If you send one out though, make sure you track it. It's like when you're working with buyers, you may or may not hear from them for a week or two at a time, but you're always sort of nurturing and monitoring your business, right? It's not necessarily just monitoring that buyer. You're monitoring your business. You're always reviewing and double checking to make sure that all those little irons in the fire that you have, be it a referral or a buyer or a seller, you're always keeping track of those.
Yeah, good point.
There are, it's certainly not something that is a good situation to be in, but certainly there are. Make sure you have a good relationship with a realtor that you're referring to. If you don't know somebody, talk to somebody who might know somebody that, you don't want to send a client to somebody you don't know and have them be completely disappointed. Don't ask some realtor on Facebook if they want a buyer, because everyone is going to say yes. Do conduct some due diligence. You're going to get 25% for making a phone call or an email. Take 20 minutes, take half an hour, and make sure that you find a good fit for that person. People have very different personalities, and if somebody calls me or for a referral, who would you send this to? My first question to them is, what are they like? What kind of person are they? Are they analytical? Are they a little bit granola? Are they do they like, who are they and what's their comfort level? I'm sorry about granola, like I see Dave laughing, but you're not going to and I really don't want to stereotype, but you've got
we knew exactly what you meant though.
Yeah, but, you look and you've got somebody sort of living their best life, and they spend their days walking through forests and smelling flowers and loving rocks and hugging trees. You're probably not going to refer them to somebody like a Jason Leslie, right? They're just very different personalities, and it's important that when you make that referral, spend some time to make sure that there's a good connection between the individuals. Don't just take the easy way out. I love that everybody's laughing.
Come on, man, you are a very professional dude and you just bust granola out.
He just described me to a T. That's why I'm laughing.
In the end, like it's a people business, right? And if you send somebody to somebody, you want them to remember that connection that you've made. Yeah, because that's more business down the road for you in the end anyway. So anybody else? I'm going to be heading up to Ladysmith here shortly, but anybody else have anything they want to touch on? I think we've chatted pretty well throughout the hour. I know Nate's finally turned his camera on. Have we connected with everybody here? Okay, we'll leave it at that. We'll see you guys in and around the office. Might see you up Island. I'll be popping into a couple of the offices there. Gotta go find try to bring a couple of seasoned realtors over to our office who are experiencing some challenges, you know, with the reputational risk that EXP has recently sort of ignited with their media frenzy down in the US. So reputation is super important, always something to keep on top of mind. You know, a really, you know, eye-opening story, you know, everybody knows the milk story. You know, it was something that happened last year, or I think it was early this spring, or maybe it was late last fall. But here we are, you know, roughly 6 months later, and the exposure of something like that is critical. So, you know, you're always being watched, and you're always being judged. So just remember, obviously, that, you know, we are professionals and we must conduct ourselves, you know, professionally all the time, even when we're not working, because, well, we're realtors and we're always working.
What happened with EXP?
So it was last fall or last spring. There was a lawsuit filed against some of the upper management and a few of the agents. There were some inappropriate activities happening at recruiting events and such of a sexual nature. And then the CEO, Sean, what's his name? It was in a newspaper article or an REM article that I read. And the upper management of corporate EXP have now been named in that lawsuit for knowing that the activities and instances were taking place and ignoring it.
Big yikes.
Yeah, big yikes. Reputation, honestly, like in this business, is everything. And so, you know, maintaining, you know, professional conduct and proper conduct at all times is really important. And, you know, if you're gonna take a sip of milk, just make sure there's no cameras anywhere in the building. So.
Yeah, no kidding.
That particular realtor, you know, when you think about the impact of something like that, and you think about, you know, the oversight and the significance of the regulator and overseeing our conduct and our behavior, you know, that sip of milk that realtor took was probably about a $35,000 bill. It was a $20,000 penalty from BCFSA plus a $2,500 administrative fine, and the loss of, you know, arguably a $10,000-$15,000 commission. Lost the client, had to pay, obviously, you know, license transfer fees, and had to pay to rebrand all his cards because his brokerage let him go. So, you know, the significance of that is not lost on, you know, the fact that it probably cost him $35,000.
That was on the radio again just the other day. They talked about it, and it was I think it was about 7 days ago, and it was almost exactly a year before that, and still in the news.
Yeah,
and everybody knows Mike's name.
Yeah. They had I was listening to the Q morning show here when I was coming into work that day after I saw it, and they were talking about it. And of course they were making fun of it. They were laughing about it, and they brought in that Will Ferrell meme, the milk incident from like Step Brothers or something like that. It was it was a joke, but we do not want to be in the media for that on any level whatsoever. So
Oh my God, no. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll let you guys go. I appreciate everybody signing on, and appreciate your participation as always. Give me a call if you need anything, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Darren. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thanks all.